Okay, so this is Hot of the Cloud, Volume 9. Hi, Michael. This is the pre-show. How are you
Hey
doing?
Andreas. Oh, I still have a cold.
Huh.
I mean, it was very bad last time. I think it's a little bit better this time, but it's still hard to kind of get. I mean, kind of, yeah. Um, it's not over. So let's see.
Okay.
Maybe next week.
You're probably not alone. 50,000 people traveling home from re-event. I would
Yeah.
suspect that half of them is coming home with a cold as well.
Yeah. I just saw the first like COVID positive tests
Okay.
in the morning from people coming back from
Yeah.
reInvent. But I mean,
Yeah,
it's so many people. So
of
it's,
course, yeah. It's not a
yeah.
surprise.
Also, without going to reInvent, chances would be very
Yeah.
high that you
That's true.
get an infection. But so that's it. So Andreas, I mean, there will be many things going on because reInvent is or was taking place. So we have I think depending on how you count, maybe 3 or 4 keynotes. There was not. I mean, my impression is, I mean, there was actually not too much in there. So it was kind of, I don't know, kind of. I don't want to say boring, but there was not too much like stuff released that really kind of blows your mind or something. It was just, I mean, okay, they are keeping on improving and stuff like this, which is cool. But I mean, they are still Amazon Web Services, so they,
Yeah.
I think they kind of reached more or less in every kind of area that we need help with at the moment. So they seem to find it harder and harder to find new services and stuff. So
Yeah. So yeah, it's a little bit like an Apple keynote. If you remember back in the days, we were watching every Apple keynote and it was always surprising what they announced, the iPhone and then the second one and so on. And nowadays no one is watching the Apple keynotes anymore because it's more or less boring, because the iPhone improves a little bit year over year, but there's no huge
I mean, it's still an iPhone, right? So it's no new device.
Exactly. And I think it's maybe the same with AWS. So yeah.
And I think that's kind of the sign that, I mean, the platform reached a certain level of maturity, because kind of the core functionality is built and now they kind of improve it. But there is no really, there's no revolution needed at the moment to make it better or something. And I think that's also a good sign.
Yeah.
But I also, I mean, those keynotes usually have such a a theme or topic or something. And I mean, this time this was really, I mean, it doesn't really resonate with me. I mean, we were traveling to space and then into the ocean, and I don't understand how this relates to my work. I mean, I basically sit here in front of my desk and type all day, so not sure how much I ever get in touch with space or the ocean while working, but I hope I don't.
Yeah, so the first keynote, it felt a little to me, they really tried to do it in a very agile and empathic way, but it was I don't know how to say it in English, but it was very steif, what we say in German. So it was very it felt like someone tried to engage with you, but it didn't really work out. So that was my feeling.
Yeah, and probably someone engaged with you that was not the speaker. So I mean, someone kind of wrote the story,
exactly.
but not the speaker. So, and that was how it felt to me. But I don't know. Maybe it's also because it was just a recording and not a live event.
Probably. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, otherwise, so I think overall, I think there were really a lot of announcements during reInvent, and I think, as you said, AWS improves step by step. I think they're going into interesting directions in some cases, and so overall, I think this was a very interesting time. And yeah, as you said, I haven't catched up with everything, so I have a huge YouTube playlist that I want to go through with the 400 sessions. I've also not watched all the keynotes yet, so I've done Vernus and Adams, but I'm also missing the other two, the machine learning one and the Peter DeSantis one, or sneaked into it a little bit. I'm watching it at very high speed, so being able to watch the keynote at almost, I think I tried 2 times speed, and it kind of works. So when I talk very slowly, it really works to watch it at double speed, basically. You still get what they're saying.
And that's kind of the thing, right? They don't say much most of the time.
Yeah.
So I mean, at least in the main keynote, the content is really very limited.
That was always the case. So
Yes, that's right.
When you're
the Peter keynote is really the one that, at least for now, resonated with me the most. And they really talk about something interesting with how they kind of made changes to their network to improve performance or basically latency for EC2 and also EBS upcoming, which is, I think, that's really cool stuff. But I mean, that's nothing that and what I really, or kind of what really kind of fascinated me is that AWS now is really building, I mean, or basically all the big cloud providers, they are building stuff that no one else has access to. So this is also kind of I don't know if that's a good or bad development, but basically in a couple of years, no one will be able to run a data center anymore because there only will be 3 or 5 players. And they have all the hardware custom made, so you cannot buy this anymore. And they do crazy things, and they can run at efficiency levels that no one else can achieve, which basically means everyone has to use their services, because otherwise it's just like energy consumption wise and things like that, completely insane to do it on your own. And this is also kind of a threat, right? Because before that, I mean, okay, you had your vendors for hardware so and stuff like this, but I mean, you could choose big. I mean, okay, there was maybe for networking gear not that many choices, but I mean, there were niche players and things like that, and now it's basically they make this on their own, and no one else knows how it works, and this is really crazy.
That's true.
But yeah,
that's true. There's another thing that I noticed, and I'm not sure what you think about it. So I think AWS started to talk about sustainability a few years ago, obviously, because it's an important topic, and also it's a hype topic as well. And so what I'm a little bit skeptical about is, so everyone talks about how sustainable everything is, and they're doing huge stuff, and then 50,000 people meet in Las Vegas. And I think, oh, is that sustainable? And I'm really wondering, is it still something you should do to travel to a conference on the other end of the world for a few days and then stay in Las Vegas in the desert? I'm not really sure is that a sustainable thing at all, and should we still do that? Is it okay because it's important to meet other ones, or is it something that we might? Is that something we need to say goodbye to and switch to more local events in the future? I don't know, in Europe or Germany. I'm not sure what to think about that, but so I was a little psyched about going to reInvent next year, and then I thought about, is this really something I want to be part of anymore? I don't know. I'm not yet decided on that.
I don't know, Andreas. I mean, that's a tough question, and I actually researched if there's a way to go to the US by ship, and it's possible, but it really
How
takes
many weeks
quite some time. Yeah. I mean, you arrive in New York, and then you have New York City, and then I think you have to find, I don't know if there are actually trains, or I don't know how this works then, but yeah. I mean, it's and then you are still in the desert, but
yeah, I was seeing some.
I mean, the whole business is kind of not really sustainable.
Consultants nowadays, so cloud sustainability consultants. I've seen some of those,
bullshit,
and I've seen them, and they're walking through the conference, and they say, "Oh, you need to use a reusable mug instead of those throwaway stuff." And I think, does that really make the difference? I don't know. I don't think so, actually. So if you travel to Las Vegas and you stay in a hotel there in the desert and with air conditioning and all that stuff, so then I think you can. Basically, doesn't matter. Yeah. I'm not decided. Okay.
I mean, yeah. That's crazy. And I mean, basically what the hotel room is, like, at least if you stay in the Venetian, I think it's at least as big as the kind of the room or the flat I live in, basically here in Germany.
So fit 2 families.
It's completely crazy.
Easily. Yeah, that's true.
I just need a bed, basically, and I think I have 4 beds or something there, so I don't know. I don't need so many. I'm just a single person, so sorry. What should I do with all those beds?
That's true. Okay. Yeah, okay. Let's see, Michael. I will think about that, and let's see what we do. Okay. So I think we should start the show. Let me play the intro, and then let's dive into the announcements that got our attention.
Yep.
Welcome to Hot Off the Cloud by cloudonaut. We are your hosts, Andreas and
Michael Wittig.
Our weekly show is all about the latest AWS news and recent experiences building with AWS. On top of that, we are answering your questions at the end of the show, so use the hashtag AskCloudOnaut on Twitter or send us a direct message via LinkedIn. In case you're watching this live, also feel free to use the chat to ask your questions there. So, Michael, we discussed in the pre-show already, we talked about reInvent already a little bit, and obviously, so there was a lot of announcements during reInvent. We have picked some of them that we found the most interesting. Definitely, the list is not complete. That's for sure.
No.
This is our selection of the things, and let's go through our findings. So the first one, I think this was announced during Werner's keynote, is announcing Amazon CodeCatalyst. And the first warning, this is still in preview. So usually, Michael, I'm making, again, an exception from our rule that we're not talking about previews. But I found it interesting. So, but it's in public preview, so you can try it out without any registration. You can just use it. It's just not basically a production-ready service. So what does CodeCatalyst do? So as the name implies already, it belongs to the code services family on AWS. So it has something to do with your source code and developing applications for AWS. And it basically combines all the things that you need for a software development project. So it starts with blueprints. So in CodeCatalyst, you will find a list of blueprints for common things that people are building. So stuff like a single page application, a backend, REST backend, and so on. And you can just with the click of a button, spin up a project pre-configured with everything you need. So it's, as far as I've seen, it's using CDK for the infrastructure as code, but it also comes then with deployment pipeline configuration and all you need basically to get that running on AWS. So that is, I think, the idea of it. Besides the blueprint, it includes a source code management. It includes a dev environment. This is something I found interesting. Actually, I have never used it. So it provides remote dev environments for you. So you can either use Cloud9 or also Visual Studio Code, for example, that then connects to this remote development environment where you then can run your, I don't know, your stuff. So this sounded interesting to me. It's very easy to use. Unfortunately, it didn't work for me. So I don't know why I didn't get, I was not able to get it up and running. Okay, but that's maybe it's because it's preview or because I only had half an hour to get that up and running. And then what it also includes, it includes the CI/CD infrastructure. So you can build deployment pipelines there as well. There are also pre-configured deployment pipelines. The one that I got in my project was not working. There was something missing. There were some errors showing up. Basically, the YAML definition was not valid. I don't know why. So basically, the blueprint was not, I think it's just not ready. The service is not yet 100% ready. So that's what I assume. Yeah, and then it also contains stuff like issue trackers. Yeah, so basically, it's intended to provide you everything you need for your software development circle. Okay. And yeah, so as I said, I tried to use it. I spin up a single page application project with it. It feels a little strange. So I'm not sure. I assume they have bought some company and CodeCatalyst came out of that. I'm not 100% sure about that. I couldn't find it anything by Googling. But it feels like the CodeCatalyst is its own application. Then you need to connect it to your AWS account. Actually, it feels a little like connecting Marble to an AWS account. So there's some, it's not really embedded into your AWS account, at least yet. And yeah, I set up the single page application, and as I said, the dev environment, I couldn't connect to it. The deployment pipeline didn't work, but I see where this is going to. So it includes the CDK for an S3 bucket for CloudFront. It includes a React project already that is pre-configured. So I think, yeah, that is interesting. Then I looked into the pricing very quickly. So I think the idea is that it's free for small projects. So for example, you get 60 hours dev environment per month per space. And then if you want more than that, you pay per user and for the compute that you use on top of a certain amount that you get for free with it. Yeah, so overall, I would say this looks interesting. It's not yet ready, so you really shouldn't use it yet. So I think it's interesting where this is going to. The overall user experience, so as this integrates everything, actually a little bit like GitHub is doing as well. So to have the source code there, you have your CI/CD pipeline there and the issues and so on. So this felt a lot better than what we have so far with code build, code commit, and so on. So yeah, so I'm really interested in where this is going to and looking forward to see this general available and production ready.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Andreas, when you say CI/CD capabilities, is this then kind of on top of code pipeline and code build, or is this not visible?
I don't know 100%. So as far as I can tell, they are not just provisioning the other services. It seems to be abstracted away from us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, cool. So the news item I looked into a little bit is about creating point-to-point integrations between event producers and consumers with Amazon EventBrige pipes. So EventBrige is really a service that is kind of one of the, I would say, most innovative services on AWS in the last years. So they release new stuff constantly. And at least for me, they release it in a way that really makes sense for me. What is this new capability pipes about? So basically, in very simple terms, what you can do is you can connect a source with a target. So whenever an event pops up at the source, you can do something and it is automatically pushed to the target. And you don't need custom code to do that. So sources that are supported, for example, are DynamoDB streams, Kinesis streams, and then the Amazon MQ service. So for both ActiveMQ and I think RabbitMQ, then Kafka is supported, both the self-managed as well as the AWS managed like MSK service, and as well SQS queues are supported. So those are your event sources. And then you can, if you wish, it's optional, can define a filter. So only for certain events you can do something. And only events that match the filter are then later built. And there's another optional step after the filter. It's the so-called enrichment step. And here you can, for example, invoke an EventBrige API destination. So this can basically read anything that has an HTTP endpoint, as well as an API gateway, which is kind of more or less the same kind of thing. It doesn't support private API gateway, so keep that in mind. You can also call a Lambda function, or you can invoke a step function, a state machine. So one limitation that I found is that the response is limited to 6 megabytes of data, but I think that's kind of a reasonable amount of data. And of course, you can also have import transformation. So if you only want to pass certain kind of type of information from your input into the enrichment, that works as well. And what I really like is that, like, if you're using EventBrige with the input transformation feature, like for rules, for example, there's always two things that you have to define. One is a so-called template, and then there was something called an inputs path map. And basically what you did is in the inputs path map, you specified it, all the kind of variables that you then could use in your input template. And this was kind of cumbersome. And now you can just, like, in your template, you can use a JSON path that starts with $, and then you can kind of navigate down the tree, the JSON tree, and that's all you need to do. So it feels much more kind of natural to me to use it. So that's really cool. And once you have the data enriched, you can then invoke a target. And targets are all kinds of things, including, and this is just a list of stuff that's supported, there's many more that is supported. Again, you can make an API call. You can publish an event to EventBrige. You can add something to a Kinesis stream. You can publish to an SNS topic or SQS. And again, this also supports input transformation. So this is what the service is about. So if you want to react to an event and then do something else in the other system, that a new pipes feature is probably something you want to check out. In the blog post, it was mentioned that there's CloudFormation support. I couldn't find it in the CloudFormation docs, so maybe the docs are not yet up to date. But it seems to be available in all regions. It also seems to be supported in CloudFormation in a couple of days at least. So that's the good news here. So that's it, Andreas.
So Michael, one question about that. So do you think we can make use of it anywhere in our projects?
Yeah, so I thought about that as well. I'm not I'm not completely sure yet. So I definitely think we have use cases for it, but I haven't found a good one yet.
So because I couldn't think of one as well. So I was...
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I was thinking about is if you could create a webhook system with that.
Mm-hmm.
So a customer defines a webhook. What you do is you basically subscribe to I don't know what your source is, an SNS topic or something, or an SQS queue. And then you create a pipe and invoke the API endpoint, which is the customer's webhook endpoint. And then this kind of thing magically take care of all the problems that arise with that, like retries, things like that. And it also supports stuff like, depending on the source, like if the source doesn't have that letter queue support, it supports that letter queues and things like that. So it's really cool. But I haven't really thought through it if it's really possible, but this was one of my first ideas. But we are actually in the current projects, like not in the current project, but in our products, we don't offer webhooks. So that's not a problem for us. But in the past, like in projects, it was a problem. So that was one idea that I had, but not entirely sure if it really would solve my problem. I have to check out the limits and stuff before I really recommend doing that.
Okay, so yeah, I'm continuing with another preview. Sorry, Michael. So this is another announcement that is still in preview. So introducing AWS Application Composer. Basically what this is all about, this is just another graphical user interface to generate infrastructure as code. So I think we've seen some approaches on that over the years. People are trying to build UIs to generate infrastructure as code. This is another one. Its main focus is the serverless application model and CloudFormation. So yeah, this is a graphical user interface where you can drag and drop the components of your architecture, combine them, and so on. So it looks very nice. So it really also it worked very good. So you could arrange your stuff there. You could draw the lines between your resources and so on. The source code it generated looked good to me. So it generated IAM policies as well. They were following least privilege principles where possible, at least from what I've seen. So overall, it looked quite good. I just did a very simple example with API gateway, a Lambda function, and an S3 bucket. But the output of that looked very promising. But I think the problem with that tool, as with all the other graphical user interface for code, is that you will reach the end of the supported resources and properties very quickly, and then basically the tool does not help anymore. So I don't see that this will add a huge value. Maybe it helps a little bit to get started because you get a feeling. So there is infrastructure as code, and this is how I can get started, and maybe it helps to get not to get to frustration too quickly, because you're able to get up and running and create your first CloudFormation template. Yeah, so I think it's not a too important release, but yeah, interesting, and it's a good thing to showcase somewhere. It's a good thing it looks very good. So that's probably the main purpose of the thing. So if you try to convince someone about infrastructure as code and you want to make sure you have to show something, then this might be helpful. Yeah, so that's it already, Michael.
But Andreas, what do you think? Like, what's the difference if you compare to CloudWatch Designer? I mean, you mentioned it looks good, so that's kind of a difference. Yeah. And I think it is more kind of purpose built for serverless applications, or what are the differences? Yeah,
I think it looks more modern. It works. It looks modern in the browser. It worked well, and it's focusing on the serverless application model. So they don't include any other resources there that are not typical for serverless applications. So I think that's the main difference. I don't know if that's if they're planning to stop there or if they want to expand the functionality. I don't know. But as often, the problem is if they really want to go into the detail and really cover all the resources that are available, that's a lot of work, and I doubt that AWS will go that path. Yeah.
Okay. So what I also find interesting is that this is it comes from the SAM, like the serverless application model kind of direction, right? So and this is really like kind of I mean, SAM and CDK and I don't know, they seem to support both, actively working on both kind of products at the moment, which is also interesting. So I'm not entirely sure if they should focus on something or just, I mean,
I would say it's much easier to
everything.
get started with SAM than getting all that CDK stuff up and running. I don't know, maybe that's the reason. And also a lot of people are using SAM already. Yeah,
I agree. Yeah. All right, Andrea. So the next one from my list here is Step Functions Distributed Map. And then the subtitle is A Serverless Solution for Large-Scale Parallel Data Processing. So, Andreas, I know that you used a step function, or you defined a step function using the map state type, right? And basically what you did is you iterated over a list of S3 buckets, and for every S3 bucket you started another step function, right?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we did for Bucket AV, because there we have an add-on that scans through all objects, and our customers asked, scan all objects in all buckets. And so we had to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically, this is now called a so-called inline map. So inline means that the list you iterate over is passed down as a state input. And this is limited in many ways, the inline map state type. So a couple of examples is you can only run 40, or you can process 40 items concurrently. The input size is limited. I think it's, I don't want to say something wrong here, but the size is limited. So that's probably what I can say, to a couple, like tens of kilobytes. And those are the limitations. And you also, everything that happens inside the map iteration is counted towards the 25,000 event history limit. And we talked about this a couple of times. So remember, this is a very important limit when you use step functions. Okay, and with this new distributed map, things work a little bit different. So first, the input can still be kind of passed as from an output of a previous state. But, and this is where it gets interesting, it can also be a file on S3 basically. So for example, a CSV file, it can also be a JSON file, so basically an array, and then it picks all the items from the array. And also what's interesting, they natively can walk through an S3 object, like list all the objects basically. The S3 object list is kind of a native source for this new distributed map type. And also it supports Amazon S3 inventory files. So this is a feature of S3. Basically, once a day, it creates a large list of all your files in an S3 bucket. So if you really want to walk through an S3 bucket many times a day or something like this, then it's much cheaper than calling the S3 API, for example. So that's the first thing that changed. And what also changed is that now they support iterating over up to 100 million items. So that seems to be the upper bound at the moment. And in the blog post, they also mentioned that the file limit is 10 gigabytes. I couldn't find this anywhere in the docs, so I'm not entirely sure on this limit. If it's in the blog post, but it's not anywhere else in the docs. So maybe there's also a limit on the file size. What else changed is that you can now work on up to 10,000 items at a time. And then always what the blog post mentioned is assuming that the downstream service supports that. So for example, if the downstream service, like for each item you invoke a Lambda function, then like 10,000 concurrent running functions is at least by default not possible. So I think the default is 1,000. You can increase it, but you have to take care of that. And then each iteration of the map is a child execution. And this is not counted towards the parent's history event limit. So basically, each iteration produces its own history, kind of. And the iteration can also be like I think there are two kinds of step functions. One is, I don't know how this is actually called, the standard one, and then there's the express one, right? Mm-hmm. And you can configure that if you could, for example, iterate over this input using express workflows. Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And another thing to keep in mind, sorry for that, is that it is only supported in 10 AWS regions. So it's not yet kind of reusable across all regions. I will not read through the list, but the ones that we are interested in, Andreas, are working. So US East is supported, and also Ireland and Frankfurt. And the pricing model works like this. So you pay one state transition per iteration. So if you, for example, iterate over 100 million items, you will pay for 100 million state transitions. And I thought, okay, this is kind of a perfect fit for the use case that you mentioned at the beginning, Andreas, like iterating over an S3 bucket. And that's what we do with Bucket.AV, right? We iterate through an S3 bucket and submit all the files as scan jobs to SQS. And I think that could be kind of solving lots of problems for us. But the thing that kind of bugs me is that is 100 million items limit. So I don't like that, because that's actually lower than what we support at the moment.
That's true.
So
yeah,
that's a little uncool.
Do you know, is that a hard limit or a soft limit? But it doesn't really matter because the customers are rolling it out to their accounts. So
yeah, I think it's kind of a hard limit. So it was not mentioned as a quota. It's kind of just in the docs. Okay, that's up to 100 million, and that's it. Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
So I also saw a use case on Twitter or on social, or like on Mastodon actually. There is someone trying to build functionality to migrate DynamoDB tables easily with that function, but basically for every item they kind of spin up a Lambda function and do the migration. I mean, it is, I would think it is kind of insanely expensive even for our use case, but I will try to figure that out.
But could you do something? Is it possible? Do you have to iterate over each object, or could you also go over a batch of objects? Isn't that possible as well? Or is that not intended?
I think batching, I'm not sure actually. I don't think it's possible.
That's actually what we do right now, right? We go over, I don't know, each page is, 100 or 1,000 list elements. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think it's possible, to be honest. I just I'm a little bit or not 100% sure, because I read something about batching, but I think it was in the pipes docs.
Okay.
So pipes seems to support batching.
Okay.
But
yeah.
not,
So let's look into it
to
see if we can use that for the kind of functionality.
Okay, Andreas. What else do you have?
Okay, so the last one is announcing Amazon OpenSearch serverless preview. And this got my attention for a reason, because we are running our own Mastodon instance, and we have created some infrastructure as code to spin that up. And one part that is still missing is basically an Elasticsearch server, because then you could better filter or search through all your posts and stuff there. And I was thinking, oh, that sounds cool. We now have OpenSearch serverless, so that could solve the issue of spinning up an expensive Elasticsearch cluster just for that little functionality. But it turns out that, first of all, OpenSearch serverless is not a serverless offering in the classic sense. So the monthly baseline costs are $690. So yeah, I don't know.
That's great.
That's definitely not a serverless service in my opinion. And then what do you get for these $690? You get 4 so-called OpenSearch compute units. So those translate to 25 gigabyte memory. And Michael, do you want to have a guess? What does it cost to spin up an Elastic or OpenSearch instance with 24 gigabyte of memory, roundabout?
I think maybe $50.
a little more. So as far as I've calculated, so 24 gigabyte memory, this would cost you about $280 per month on Elasticsearch, with on-demand nodes, by the way, not with reserved or anything. So you pay more, you double the costs by switching to serverless for the same amount of compute power. So yeah, I don't know. So this is another, in my opinion, this is really a bad deal in my opinion. So it's comparable to our serverless version 2 and to Neptune serverless. Actually, I think you will. It's very hard to find a scenario where you can really reduce your costs by switching to this serverless offerings. So first of all, they are not serverless, because you're not, it's not serverless at all. And then it's really hard to find a scenario where this really turns out. So you need a scenario where you need very huge compute power for very little time. And then still the problem is that the baseline that you have to provision is quite high. So I don't know, scaling up manually for those periods of time would be much more efficient and much more cost efficient as well. So actually I don't see where this is helping. I'm really, so if anyone is using those serverless offerings and found it to be price competitive with on-demand and reserved, please reach out to me, because I cannot calculate. I didn't came up with any scenario where this is actually a good deal. Yeah. Okay. So that's
okay. Cool thing, Andreas.
Not so cool thing. So actually, there's a blog post around on my to-do list. I have to write about that, and I have a few calculations, and I think I need to share that. So and they should stop calling that serverless. That's really, I don't know, misleading actually.
All right. So, Andreas, I think it's time for a short break here. So we have partners that have job offerings for you. So if you're looking for a new job, and we can definitely assure you that AWS expertise is in high demand. So the two job offerings here is the first one is from our partner TechRaiser, and they are hiring cloud consultants focusing on AWS serverless. So if that is your kind of thing, and you also kind of probably noticed that this is our thing because we picked a lot of news from this area, then you should apply, and you should enjoy kind of developing using serverless services like Lambda, API Gateway, AppSync, DynamoDB, and also the CDK. You can join TechRaiser in Germany, Hanover, Duisburg, Frankfurt, Hamburg, Munich, as well as in Vienna, Lisbon, and Lucerne. So feel free to apply if that's something that is interesting to you. And also our partner Demicon is looking for a senior lead cloud solutions architect AWS, working remotely from Germany or the EU. So if you are into infrastructure as code with Terraform and as well as containers with AKS and ECS, then this is for you. Demicon is one of the largest technical consulting teams in and leading Atlassian full service provider in the German, Swiss, and Austria region. So become part of the team with a focus on cloud technologies. You can find links to both job descriptions in the show notes. And this is, I think, the best time in the year to apply to a new job. So if you're looking for a change, this should definitely be something that you tackle between this and next year, right? So feel free to check them out. So Andreas, do we have anything else here before we kind of close?
So Michael, I'm very sorry. I totally missed up one thing. So I set our YouTube stream to private.
Yes, I noticed it.
This is why no one could join the stream. So we don't have any questions in the chat. Oh, I'm so sorry. This was really...
Okay, no worries. So we can go over the questions next time, right?
So
if you have a question, write a comment and we will answer it in the next show, and also in the comments.
Yeah, I'm very sorry about that. So I will do better next time. So that's it. We'll be back next week. Subscribe to our newsletter, a podcast, or this YouTube channel to make sure you're not missing the upcoming shows. I'm promising to publish the next one as public, so you can join. We want to thank our supporters who make this show possible. Please consider supporting our work with a recurring or one-time donation as well. You will find everything you need in the show notes, also about the job descriptions. Thanks for your attention. Bye.
Yes, and before you kind of stop watching, let us know what's your favorite reInvent announcement as well in the comments.
That would be great.
And so that's it from me as well. Bye. See you next time.
Bye.